Okay, hi, Elaine.
Okay.
My name is Kate. I'm a CFI. I'm a grade 7 CFIS student, and I'm really excited to interview you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Elaine Montgomery, and I'm no longer a grade 7 student. That was many, many years ago. Anyway, and yes, so I've lived in Calgary for about 55 years, I think, and yeah, at least that. Anyway, and I moved to a condo 4 years ago. So I'm sitting in my second bedroom, looking out at my balcony, and beyond the balcony, I've got evergreen trees, which is absolutely glorious. And it's a southeast window. So the light that you're seeing on my picture is coming in from the window, which is very nice at certain times of day, which I like when I'm doing Zoom meetings. And I've been busy for the last year trying to keep out of trouble. And we've done a lot of going outside. I carry a chair in my car, and I phone my friends and say, let's go meet at South Glenmore Park, and I'll bring a chair and bring something to drink, and we'll sit and have coffee. And so we've been doing that several times all year. And then when the weather's decent, we go hiking. And my current favorite, what would I say, thing, I'm looking for bluebirds. And so I've gone looking southwest of Calgary because there's bluebird boxes on the fence posts. And if you drive down there, you can theoretically see bluebirds. So I went a couple of weeks ago, at the day after a snowstorm, and drove a couple of roads, and there was no bluebirds. And so then I went last Friday, which was a glorious day, and apparently the bluebirds stay in their little houses when it's cold, and so they were out flying around. So I found bluebirds, so I'm happy.
I
Anyway,
love that.
yeah.
You for introducing yourself. That's so interesting. Yeah, I love my grandparents. One of my grandparents, they live down in Newfoundland, and they live out in like the country from St. John's. So like I'll go like blueberry picking with them in the summers and stuff when I go down there. So I love that. Yes. Okay. So I've heard you love to travel, and that you've traveled so much during your lifetime, and I love like traveling. I want to travel when I'm older and stuff. So what was your favorite place that you've traveled to like during the
Okay, so my people ask that question, and I would say I don't have a favorite place. I have places that there are parts of them that I really enjoy, but that's many, many different places. One place that I always wanted to go to, and it really was wonderful, was Tibet. I went to Lhasa in Tibet, and it was very high, and I was expecting it was going to be very high and very uninteresting. And Lhasa is built in the mountains, and the weather was absolutely glorious. It was like it was here last week, so bright and sunny and no cloud, no clouds and no smoke or anything. And it was a really interesting place. And the highest we went to a monastery that was at 16,000 feet.
Oh, wow.
Didn't stay there we just went for a visit and then came back. Last I think was at about 10 or 12,000. But that was interesting. And another country that I thoroughly enjoyed the country, and I really learned a lot, was Japan. I spent a month in Japan when I was not much older than you are. And I really enjoyed the people there because they were very, I would say, very gentle. They appeared very gentle, and they were certainly very kind to foreigners. But one of the things I noticed, and I've used ever since, is I never heard a baby crying in the street, because they carry their children the first year mostly. They put them in packs and they carry them, and the children are very, very comfortable with their parents. And so one of the things we did, if you can imagine, we rented a car and drove from Kyoto to, from Tokyo to Kyoto. And we drove down the main road going, and coming back, we drove through the middle of the country. So sometimes the road was paved and sometimes it was gravel. And one day we were driving and we saw a couple with a child who looked to be about 2, all dressed up. It looked like they were dressed up for a festival. And so we stopped our car and they were walking, and we said, may we take a picture of your baby? And they said, oh, sure, no problem. And so they set the baby down, and then they walked a little distance away so that they weren't going to be part of the picture necessarily. And then they said, "On side," the child goes, "On side," waves and smiles, and had no fear of us at all, and was quite happy to have the picture taken. We took some pictures. And it was like that all the time. There would be children in restaurants. They never cried. It was very delightful. And I thought, yeah, children, when they cry, they're crying for a reason. So you have to figure out what it is and be kind to them and do whatever. So that was Japan. But it's a wonderful country to visit.
Yes, I love that. In Japan, it's so clean and stuff too, and it has such beautiful like places you can visit. But yeah, I love that. Like they are like really gentle. I've never been, but I really want to go. My friends have been, but yeah, that's great. I love that. So this kind of like ties up to a little bit about what we were just talking about. But like, what has been like your favorite experience when you were traveling?
My favorite experience? That's a good question. I think I find a lot of my experiences that I've enjoyed have had to do with almost more with people than with the scenery. And so some of the things that had happened, so one of the other things I did in Japan, I heard that there was an artificial ski hill that they'd built outside Tokyo. And it was to be open in the summer. So they obviously had something on the hill that you could slide down, and I forget what that was. And I thought, but being from Calgary, I have to go see that. So anyway, so in Tokyo, they have a circle underground. No, it wasn't underground, it was on top. But anyway, the tram that goes all the way around the city. And then if you wanted to go in any direction, you got off the tram at whatever the connection was, and then you got off and you went straight to where you were going. But in Tokyo, you could get on this and you could keep riding it around all day if you wanted to and not pay anything because it just kept circling. Anyway, so I figured out how I was going to get out to the ski hill. And so I had to go partway on the circle line and then partway straight out to where the ski hill was. And it was at a place that was like, I would say Okotoks, only I made the mistake and I got out at Okotoks North. And I no sooner got off the train and I realized, whoops, I'm in the wrong place. So I had to wait for the next train and get back in and go for one more stop that was now in Okotoks instead of Okotoks North. And I went and looked at the ski hill, and which was really, it was a good destination. Other than that, it wasn't profound. So when I came back, I got on the train and I was coming into the city, and there was a young man who sat down next to me, and he basically said, "May I practice my English with you?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." And so we got on the train and we got in and got back on the circle line, and I had to go around the circle again to get to my hotel. And so we had a very nice chat about Japan and what it was like. And he was about the same age as I was, and we talked. And then when it was time for me to get off, I stood up to get off, and he said, "Oh, goodbye, it's been nice visiting, and now I have to go back to my stop." So I got off and went home, and he stayed on the train, and he'd come 2 stops past his stop to talk with me. And I thought, isn't that lovely?
That.
And to make sure I got off the right place.
Oh, that's so nice. I love that.
Those are the kinds of stories that, you really think of and you remember. And another one I will tell you, which was similar, is my husband and I were traveling in England. We rented a car. And we decided we were going to stop in Cambridge for overnight at the university. And when we got there, we realized that it was a weekend when all the parents come to visit the students. So there were no hotels to be seen. And of course, we tended to travel and not stop until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So there was no hotels available. But we went to one place that was a rooming house for students. And we knocked on the door, and a young student came to the door, and he said, "There's no rooms available, except there is one room that is, I think, a storeroom. It's a storeroom or something, but I think there might be a bed in there, so maybe you could stay there," because there was nothing else in the whole of Cambridge. But he said, "Our landlady's out and she won't be back till 9 o'clock. So we said, fine. So this is September. So by 9 o'clock, it's getting dark. So we went and explored Cambridge and came back. And when she said, She said, I'm sorry, but it is a storeroom. And she said, there absolutely is not room for you to stay in there. So no, you can't stay. So here we are, 9:30 on, in the night, in the evening, with no place to stay. So I said to my husband, well, why don't we go into a pub and see if by any chance they have a room over the pub, because some of them did. So he just pulled up in front. He stayed in the car. I went in and asked the bartender if by any chance they had rooms upstairs. And he said, no, I'm sorry, we don't have any. We said, do you have any idea where there might be a room? And he said, not really. He said, and the next town is 10 miles down the road. So anyway, went back out and got in the car and we're saying, well, what do we do? Do we go on or do we not? And there was a knock on the window and this man said, I just heard your accent and you're Canadian. And he said, I was in Canada during the war and I think I know where you can stay, but I have to go and check with my wife. And he said, I'll be back in 10 minutes. So we said, fine. So off he went. He came back and he said, it's fine. You can come and stay with us. He said, we are the parents at one of the Cambridge colleges and the students stay where we are and we're the parents and we look after them. And we have 2 sons, but both our sons are away at school right now. So you can have their room. And so we went, that's where we stayed. And we sat in the evening and we heard all about the stories about all the students at Cambridge and all the naughty things they got up to. And we had a really good visit with them.
I love that. That's just like, I like hearing those kinds of stories because it's just like human kindness opening up their homes and stuff.
And you just sort of do this and cross your fingers and things will turn out. So when you're traveling, just do what, just do what feels right and you'll be all set.
Yeah, I love that. Like, definitely. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Portage Prairie, Manitoba. And I lived in, briefly in Portage, and then Duck Lake in Saskatchewan, and East End. Have you heard of East End?
I have not.
It's near Moose Jaw. And it's called East End because it's the east end of the Porcupine Hills, but it's in Saskatchewan. Porcupine Hills, of course, are in Alberta. Mm-hmm. And so we lived there, and then we moved to Raymond, which is in southern Alberta, and then I moved to Olds, which is in just north of Calgary. Went to university in Edmonton, and then I worked out of Edmonton for a year, and then that's when I decided that I was going to go traveling. So I traveled for a year, bought myself a ticket around the world and took off, and came back to Calgary, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, that's great. Like, definitely, you've gotten around. Like, that's, I have, the only place I've been is Olds. I went to Olds for like a student conference.
At the agricultural school.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's great to hear. So this isn't like a question on the sheet or anything, but I was hearing that you had like a very cool experience when you were traveling with like elephants or something. Like you had.
Oh yes, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh sure, and that's the story that I told for StoryShare, so it's on the audio. But the story that I told, I called it The Elephant's Farewell, and so. The story is I was traveling in Botswana and I said the reason I liked Botswana was because I read books by an author who'd grown up in Rhodesia, and he wrote about a women's detective agency in Botswana, and I really liked his stories and I thought what a cool place, I'd like to visit there sometime. So I got a chance to go and I went on a 2-week safari. It was a camping safari where we slept in tents and we went out every morning in the trucks, and there those layered trucks you see the pictures of when you're looking at, and we'd go looking for birds and animals, and sometimes we'd stop and watch them, and sometimes we'd track them. The drivers were our guides, and they were really good at tracking. So one morning when we got in the truck, he said, we've had a report that there's a dead elephant not very far from here. And we'll go and see if we can find it. So we went looking, and sure enough, we pulled up to a tree, nice shady tree, and there was an elephant that was lying on its side with its legs toward us. And we could see that there was a hole in its stomach. We couldn't tell how large, but about this big. And it was maybe 50 yards away from the road track. And probably another 50 yards to one side, there was a whole herd of elephants. And I don't know if you know, the elephants travel in matriarchal herds. So there's no males. So they travel in matriarchal herds. So they were standing there, and they'd stopped the truck, and we're looking at all this. And then we sort of looked down underneath the tree, and there's a whole pride of lions. And some of them are sitting on their haunches, and some of them are looking around. Some of them are sound asleep. And we thought, well, that's very interesting. I wonder what they're up to. So we just waited. And then all of a sudden, one of the elephants, one of the large elephants, came from the group, walked over from the group over to the dead elephant. And she stopped and she looked, and then she touched it with her trunk. And she stood for a few minutes. Then she just walked around the elephant and walked away from the elephant, turned around so that she was facing the herd on the far side of the fallen one. And after she'd done that, then the next one came that was large, and she came over and she did exactly the same thing. She stood and looked at the elephant for a few minutes, then she touched it with her trunk. And then she walked over to the first one, and they touched trunks. And then she turned around, so they're both standing side by side looking back at the herd. And this continued one at a time of the big elephants until the bigger ones had all come and paid their respects to the dead elephant. And then the teenagers came, but they each brought one of the babies. So there was a teenager and a baby, and they came two at a time, and they came over. And it was like the teenager was showing the baby what you were to do. And so they each touched this one, and they went over and we think it was the matriarch that had come first. So they came over. So now we're having a herd of elephants all side by side, all looking at the dead elephant, looking towards their friends. And so the teenagers all came two at a time, teenager with a baby, till all of those elephants had come, paid their respects, and went and stood and watched the elephants. And the whole time, the elephants did not make a single sound. The lions didn't make a single sound. And we certainly didn't. Were sitting like this thinking, I hope those lions don't wake up. And just watched what was going on. And it was just quite beautiful. And the whole thing took probably about an hour, I think. It wasn't fast. And it was just very respectful. And that was my story. I just loved it.
That's so nice. I love elephants, and I want to have an experience with them when I'm older, when I'm traveling.
Go to Zimbabwe and Botswana. There's lots of elephants.
Okay, I will. I'll put that on my list. But I love how the lions, they didn't do anything, right? Because they I think maybe they understood what they were doing, and they let the elephants kind of do their thing. Sorry, that's just my bell. But they kind of just let the elephants do their thing and pay their respects and stuff. Which.
But the other thing is, maybe they were sitting, waiting, and thinking, I wonder if we can get our next meal sometime.
Probably, maybe. I don't know. No.
But they certainly weren't going to do it when the elephants were there. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for that story. So I think you kind of answered this already, because I heard you had mentioned your husband. But have you? So did you meet your husband when you were traveling, or?
No, when I came back to Calgary. I was working as a visiting nurse, and I was playing tennis in my spare time, and I met him at the tennis court.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah, do you have any children?
Yeah, I have a daughter who lives in Vancouver. She's a midwife.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Yeah. She inherited it from her mother. I was an obstetric nurse. One of my jobs, I had many jobs, but I became an obstetric nurse and then a doula. And so anyway, she was brainwashed.
Nice. Well, you just said you had many jobs. What was your favorite job?
My favorite job? Actually, the one that I was a public health nurse in northern Alberta, and I was driving, and I did all different things. I go to the schools and do my injections and do home baby visits and anything else that needed medical attention in northeast of Edmonton. And after a year, I decided I was not going to spend my life giving injections to kids in schools. So that's when I saved my money for the whole year, and that's when I bought my ticket on the ship and So my first traveling, there was a shipping line called the Pacific and Orient, P&O Orient line. And they had ships that went from Vancouver in both directions, Vancouver, Hawaii, maybe Australia, maybe Japan, around the world, back to Vancouver. And you could buy a ticket around the world and you could get on one ship and then get off and then get on the next ship when it came, and then you go to the next place. So that's what I did. So I started off from Vancouver, went to Hawaii, and I was with a friend, and we were going to work there for 3 months and then go to Australia and work there for 3 months as nurses, and then go finish our travels. And we got to Hawaii, and that was quite beautiful. And the next ship that was supposed to be coming had a fire on the ship, and they had to cancel that circle around the world. So all of a sudden, we don't have a ship after 3 months. And so the next ship coming was going to Japan. And that's how I ended up going to Japan when I was so young. It worked out really well. And so spent the month in Japan, and then got on the next ship. And I didn't get off. We went to Hong Kong. We were in Hong Kong for 3 days, Singapore, Ceylon, Sri Lanka now. Got off in Egypt, spent a week in Egypt, a week in Greece, 3 months in Europe traveling, then a month. Actually, we had a car at the time. The car was broken into and everything was stolen. And so that meant that I was going to get insurance. And I thought, good, I can enjoy England. So I went to England for another month and flew home.
Wow, that's
So,
all those places. Like,
yeah, all those places. It was just fun. And yeah, so one of the things I remember was a day in Singapore that was really, really hot. And I remember everybody was complaining, and I thought, why are they complaining? And I realized I'd been in Hawaii for 5 months, and hot was no longer an issue.
yeah, you got used to it.
Yeah, and I have a picture of myself feeding the squirrels in the park in Singapore, so that was fun.
I love that. Everything you just named, I was like, that's exactly where I want to go. Like, I want to go to Greece, I want to go to Singapore, Japan, like I want to go to all this, like Egypt and stuff. It sounds so awesome.
It's fun. It's fun to go, and sometimes they're different than you expect. So another place, when I was in Singapore, there was a couple of people my age on the ship, and they were going to Angkor Wat, and they said, "Why don't you come with us?" And I said, "Well, I don't really think I can break the trip here, because I don't know when the next, it would be difficult to get off the ship now and then get the next ship and so on." So I didn't go with them to Angkor Wat, but I always thought I'd like to go there. And so 8 years ago, my daughter and I decided we were going. Oh, I know. I phoned my daughter. This was in 2013. I phoned her and I said, "Do you want to go to Borneo?" Her name is Kat, by the way. "Do you want to go to Borneo?" And she said, "Why would I want to go to Borneo?" "Because there's orangutans and it'd be really cool to go and see." He said, "I'll call you back." So she called the next day and she said, "Of course I'll come." So anyway, so we went to Borneo, and then we went to Bali, and then she had to go back to Vancouver to work. So I decided now's the time to go to Angkor Wat. So I flew from Bali to Siem Reap, which is right near Angkor Wat, and went there. And what surprised me about Angkor Wat, because you hear that it's a temple, but it's basically a whole temple complex that probably covers several miles.
Oh, wow.
And there's some beautiful buildings, and then there's a lot of forest type buildings, and then there's forest that's grown up through some of the other buildings, and it's a fascinating place to go. So if you ever get a chance, go to Angkor Wat. Maybe it's my favorite place to have visited. My most surprising place.
Surprising, yeah.
Yeah.
I like how like you expect something and then you get like a better outcome. Like that's it's really good. But yeah, and there's so many, like everything you just named, it's like there's so much history attached to that as well, like history throughout like the years and stuff, and like it's so interesting to learn about it as well. So if I were to ask them what fun fact would your family say about you, what do you think they would say?
What fun fact?
Yeah.
That would be interesting. Oh, I've got it. Okay, this is another story from when I was about your age. So there was a group, we lived at the time, we were living in Olds, and we lived over the bank because my dad was the bank manager. And in the basement was just a cement, basically a big cement room with pillars, and mother did her washing down there. And there was another little room over in the corner, and nobody was supposed to know, but that was where the bank vault was, where all the money was kept and so on. But this was our basement room that we only used for, as they say, mother did her washing. Anyway, so at the time, square dancing was in, and my parents were square dancers, so they taught us how to square dance. And so we invited friends. And so, you know, square dancing, you have groups of 8. So we had 16, there were 16 of us, boys and girls. Anyway, so we're having this little party downstairs, and my parents were upstairs, and they'd come down once in a while. And of course we have, you know, we have food, and we have our record player, and we're doing our dancing and so on. And once in a while, the parents would come, they came down the stairs. And so anyway, and the boys had decided they were going to smoke cigars. And so the girls, of course, we were very pure. We did not smoke cigars, but they were going to smoke cigars. Anyway, so that was fine. So they smoked their cigars, and I think my parents probably smelled the smoke. So somebody came down the stairs, and they'd walk in, and they didn't see anything, and they just, how are you doing? We're fine. We're having a good time. It's okay. They go back upstairs and so on. Anyway, so we had the party. Everybody went home, and that was fine. And the next time mother came down to wash, she went to her washing machine, took the lid off, and guess where all the cigars had gone? Into the washing machine.
Oh no.
They were always quite happy to remind us of that.
Oh my, that's just so unfortunate.
That was fun.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so fun.
Yeah.
Okay, I had so much fun interviewing and hearing all about your life and your story. Thank you so much for like telling me everything in so much detail. It was really, really interesting to hear about it. Thank you.
And it was good to talk to you, and you do interviewing very well. You made me think of things I hadn't thought of for years. So thanks so much, Kate. I'm going to be calling you Kat if I'm not careful. And so why are you doing the interviewing? Is this a school project, or how did you get involved with it?
Well, I love like traveling and like hearing like different perspectives and stuff. And like I love like talking like different people, like different like ages, different cultures, different ethnicities, like just hearing like their stories and stuff. And so the like travel studies teacher at our school, I work with her and like some of other students to like a team to like host like discussions on different topics and stuff. So she was telling me, oh, like there's something called StoryShare, like are you interested? And I was like, yes please. Okay. So yeah, I did this like completely voluntarily, but like I had so much fun, and I was looking forward to it as well. So, and like everything was so awesome.
Well, if you ever have questions about traveling or want some hints and stuff,
yeah,
give me a call.
I will. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about it because I have many stories.
I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much.
Good. Okay, take care, and thank you. This has been fun.
You as well. Thank you.
Okay, you're most welcome, Kate.